All right, today we're going to look at the horticulture industry, which is chapter 4 in your textbook. The thing to kind of understand about this chapter, it's very heavy on the terminology because it's really introducing you to everything in the horticultural industry. So we'll get started. So what you should be able to do is basically describe the different plant sciences, botany, agronomy, horticulture, and forestry. You're going to compare and contrast edible and ornamental horticulture. Understand organic and sustainable production of crops. And then discover sources for locally grown food. Describe the green industry, and then discuss the outlook for horticulture careers, and we will do some, like a little project with that. So the first thing they want you to look at is basically the plant science area. So if you look at plant sciences, you have the areas of botany, agronomy, forestry, and horticulture thrown in there. You can see, basically, if you describe plant science, it's the study of plant growth, reproduction, and adaptation, as well as the use of plants for food, fiber, and ornamental purposes. So basically, we want to be able to eat them. We want them to look pretty. We want them to serve purposes for us. So we're going to look at each of these separately. So we're going to start with botany here. If you look at botany, basically, just like this setting, they're kind of looking at the lab area. They're looking at research. They're looking at commercial growing and the way those things work. One of the careers they highlight here is being a botanist. If you are a botanist, you're going to be looking definitely at the genetics, ecology, classifying, lots of different things in a lab setting. All right, agronomy. This is where your brain should think farmer. Think of field crops. They talk about the food, fiber, fuel. Career would be an agronomist. Those are people that go out in the fields, check on the crops. If you're not familiar with the picture that you're looking at here, this is actually a cotton field. If you didn't know, there's a cotton boll. The yellow flower is actually how they start, and then they turn into that white fluff that we know as cotton once they're fully ripened. So if you're looking at crops, basically, they're not always edible or usable in their raw form. A lot of times we have to do some further processing to them. If you're thinking of things like soybeans, they also list corn, rice, and wheat. And obviously corn, you could be thinking of sweet corn versus field corn. And we'll talk about that later on too. But obviously sweet corn has a higher sugar content. Forestry, think of trees. There are people that are out there that are foresters, and they are basically managing tree plots and making sure that they are sustainable. They also call that silviculture, if you're looking at that too. Kind of an interesting career area that we don't have a lot of in Thief River Falls. Edible horticulture. Edible obviously means that they can eat it, and they list olericulture, pomology, and viticulture. So in the image there, they have a blueberry plant. And if you look at all those, basically you're looking at plant cultivation. They're harvesting those fruits and vegetables so that we can consume them. And then ornamental horticulture, that is the pretty stuff. And this picture is showing you some sod. Obviously we're going to use that to make our yards look pretty. They talk about floriculture, nursery and landscape, interiorscaping, and turfgrass management in this area. All right, so olericulture. This is talking about herbs, root stems, leaves, flavoring, for foods, perfumes, and medicines. This is showing you some basil in the picture here. It's a Thai basil. Olericulture, that's vegetables. Think of root stems, leaves, flowers, or fruit that we are consuming. And all fruits are vegetables, but not all vegetables are fruits. This is where you can get in some arguments with your family members about what is a fruit and what is not. It's kind of interesting if you look at the definition. The next one here, they're still talking about olericulture. If you're working in an industry, that a lot of them are working outdoors because they're looking at mass production. Conditions can vary. They have to be very good at solving problems if there's a pest issue or maybe a drought problem. Pomology, if you're looking at in the image there, that's actually macadamia nuts. They're native to Australia. We don't have those here. But you're going to be looking at cultivating, processing, storing, and marketing. They have pomologists listed as a career for this one. That's fruits, nuts, trees, and brambles. Brambles are basically, think of like raspberries, blackberries. That's what a bramble is, because I know a lot of people get confused by that term too. So growing practices, a lot of times you're going to find orchards with this one. If you've traveled in southern Minnesota, you've seen more orchards, like apple orchards especially. Obviously, different states have different, like more citrus fruits. They might have nuts. If you look at the picture, that's actually an almond tree that you're looking at. They are going to work too to have earlier harvest, increase yields. Basically anything in these industries is looking at trying to get a product to a consumer faster. The faster a plant can produce a crop that we can consume, the more money they make faster. And also increase yields. Yields are talking about the amount of product that a plant is making. So like you might hear somebody talking about how their soybean field harvest went. They're going to talk about bushels per acre for the yield for that. Some other products are talking about it could be weight. Viticulture, also called viniculture. That, if you look at, you're looking at grapes. Obviously, so they have a couple of careers listed here too. They have viticulturists. They also have enologists. These people basically are going to pay close attention to pruning and training vines, making sure that soils are properly fertilized. An enologist is actually a person that's going to use those grapes and make wine out of it. So there's some chemistry involved with that, and obviously food standards to make sure that we're keeping people healthy. Viticulture, it's talking about grape cultivation. This is actually a picture of a vineyard in Napa Valley. And enologists, we already talked about, those people are making the grapes into wine. There are 7 million tons of grapes in the United States. 90% of these grapes are actually from California. You can see the other leading states listed there. So this one's talking about the fact that you're going to need a college degree. They're going to work outdoors, lead teams, do some critical thinking and problem solving. One of the big issues with grapes is actually, if you think about birds, that's just a free meal for them. So it's kind of hard to keep pests out of them all the time. Floriculture, this is some of the pretty stuff. So this is going to be in the ornamental horticulture piece. If you were also in my floral design class, you're going to learn about floriculture. Lots of different careers listed here, anywhere from floral designer to greenhouse owner. If they're basically producing cut flowers, they're going to be in that floral industry. They also talk about bedding plants, house plants, potted plants. Basically, the interesting piece with any floral shop, they're typically selling house plants, and it could be for like a funeral. It could be, maybe somebody wants a longer living plant than, buying some cut flowers that are going to die in a few days. Nursery and landscape industry. These ones, these are people that are working on really trying to get plants to grow. They might be working in a greenhouse setting. They may also be outdoors. It kind of depends on where you're at too. If you think about our environment and how plants thrive in that or don't thrive when you have really harsh winters. Lots of different pieces involved in this. Sometimes, when you look at this, their overall goal is making yards look pretty or properties to look pretty inviting, making you want to come in. So you can see a lot of these are grown in fields. They may actually dig them up out of the field. You might have them in greenhouses or shade houses depending on the plant. And you have listed here, they have trees, shrubs, ground cover, vines, and perennials. Perennials, which we have not talked about, are going to be plants that keep coming back every year. So it's really an investment. It's not a one-time buy and they're going to die. They're going to keep coming back. So they're also showing you some of the different pieces here too. These are also, some of these terms I'm going to just put into a Quizlet for you guys because I know it's hard to learn on the fly here. But they are talking about like the B&B. This one, the first picture on the left is balled and burlapped. They have bare root trees and then pot in pot. So these are all different ways. If you've actually bought trees before, they are showing you different methods of how they deal with that. That's just one component to that nursery and landscape industry, which hopefully we will get to see more later on. Landscaping careers, they're actually, if you think about really good careers out there, would be something really good for someone with a very seasonal, winter job. They could pick up, do some nursery landscape in the summertime in our area. And they're really trying to make things visually pleasing outside. There's a big push to that whole curb appeal, making your property have more value with curb appeal. And if you guys watch anything in HGTV, you've seen that. They always make sure they come in and add beautiful plants toward the end. Interior-scaping. This is kind of interesting where they try to make indoor landscapes. They sometimes do it in homes, businesses, classrooms, hospitals. The whole point of it is to make people feel calm and relaxed. So there's some kind of interesting pieces that you might see like in the inside of a mall where they add trees to make it look kind of homey. Turfgrass industry, this is actually a huge industry, especially if you are a sports fan. We were actually lucky enough to tour Soldier Field the one year when I went to National FFA convention, and they dug up a piece of the turf, and it was kind of cool because they had a whole system underground to keep the sod from freezing and being ruined in the field. They basically had an antifreeze system. But if you look at these, they're also going to be golf courses, commercial homes. Sod farms are a big piece to that because they actually are going to find good varieties that are insect and disease resistant, heat resistant, and can handle foot traffic. So we kind of talked about some of this stuff already. Obviously, they're listing, if you look at this picture, they're working on a golf course. They have to do a lot of mowing with a golf course, so you have to have sod that can handle being mowed and kind of know what it can tolerate for length. And obviously handle people walking on it, golf carts, and people golfing on it. If you look at this guy here is rolling up a chunk of sod. The trick with sod is they have to keep that wet. If it dries out, they're going to have some issues trying to get it to actually basically reattach where it's going to be put on somebody's property. So those rolls can weigh over 50 pounds. If you're working at a sod farm, being a laborer, you're not going to need a college degree. Sometimes you can learn on the job and work your way up. College degree would be awesome, but may not be feasible for all aspects of the industry. Combining edible and ornamental plants. So when you look at this, sometimes people will use their containers to put like lettuce in it. They might have some beautiful grass plants in it. This might also be flower beds that you have at home where you have some, flowers on the edge of a vegetable bed. You can basically do whatever you please with your land and put whatever plants you want on it within reason. But there's kind of a huge piece in this whole organic edibles. This is really a personal opinion piece here too. The hard part with organic, they're a higher cost and they're more labor intensive. In order for something to be labeled as organic, it has to be USDA certified, and it can't have any chemical food additives. So it's kind of an interesting piece that the USDA has really started to control, and they market it so that it's supposedly healthy for you. There's some research that still needs to be done with some of it too. And when it says biological pest control versus chemical, we'll talk about biological be basically creating barriers for the pest instead of spraying them with the poison to get rid of them. Sustainable agriculture, there's a huge piece. If you hear people talking about things, they talk about integrated pest management where you take those steps and measures to kind of prevent pests before you use chemicals. Soils, they're trying to do more with preserving our soils so that we don't destroy them and overuse them. Eating local, obviously there's less pollution with vehicles moving. You're supporting the local economy, and that's what that whole eating local piece is all about. CSA is kind of an interesting topic. Basically, I would buy into a share of the farm and get a portion of the food back, kind of taking the risk with the farmer. And then plants in the green industry, there's a lot of different benefits to having plants. Obviously, they clean our air, they're a food source, and they can add nutrients to the soil. And there's a few slides here we're not going to get to because we have a time limit on this, but plants are really good for us for the fact that they're aesthetically pleasing. They make us feel good. They look good. A lot of good pieces to that. So look for a Quizlet from me too to go through the terms that are in this presentation, and we'll go forward from there. Thanks for listening.